25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Launch commit. Liftoff. We have liftoff with Apollo 14. 3 minutes past the hour. The tower is clear.
Houston is controlling. 16 seconds. Pitch and roll program started. 14 maneuvering to a proper flight course. 25 seconds.
The Arecibo Observatory has been used, although sparingly, to search for signals from civilizations in space, and just once, to broadcast a message to a distant star cluster called M13. But is there anyone out there to talk to? With 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, could ours be the only one with an inhabited planet? How much more likely it is that the galaxy is throbbing and humming with advanced societies. Perhaps near one of those pinpoints of light in our night sky, someone quite different from us is glancing idly at the star we call the sun and entertaining just for a moment an outrageous speculation.
Well, this is the biggest, strangest mystery in all the universe at the present time. Wow. These are called fast radio bursts. They are explosions in space with the power of 500 million stars, and they vanish without a trace in a split second. So astronomers are scratching their heads. What could cause such a flash of light for a brief second and then disappear? Now, we've gone through the usual subjects like colliding neutron stars, black holes, and stuff like that.
It's none of that.
None of them seem to work except one possibility, which is little green men.
Seriously?
Seriously. At Harvard, a paper has been written saying that the burst of radiation is consistent with an alien civilization firing up its starships. That is, gunning its engines and warp driving into outer space. So the energy being created is sufficient to drive a laser beam, which will then send a sail near the speed of light. And that could be the beginning of a starship. And so this paper says, in all seriousness, they've done the math, they've done the numbers, that since they've ruled out most of the natural phenomenon, what's left is an unnatural phenomenon, an alien civilization firing up its engines.
Astronomers say they're hearing signs from deep space. They're not sure what they are. It's only the second time in history they've heard these signals, and they're not ruling out aliens as the cause behind it. From SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we have Seth Shostak and we have Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi. He is a professor and works with NASA. These are two people very smart, very clued in. First thing I want to get to here is what exactly are these signals, these fast radio bursts from deep space that the scientists have heard?
The answer to that is we don't know the answer to that. All we know is what the signals look like or sound like if you're kind of into audio, right? They're called fast radio bursts because astronomers are very unimaginative when it comes to naming anything. So they're a bit of radio noise that goes right down the radio dial. It's like a slide whistle. If you could hear it, it would be like that, but in a tenth of a second or less, an eye blink. And we've found 60 of these things. This latest one, it's interesting. It's the second one that's been found that not only does it make this slide whistle sound once, but it repeats. If you go back a couple of days later, you might hear it again, and that makes it very interesting. The ones that repeat give us enough info that we can figure out where are they coming from, right? That's what you want to know, where are they coming from? And the first one that was found back in 2012, it's coming from a tiny nondescript galaxy 3 billion light years away. 3 billion light years, that's a lot of light years. A light year itself is like 6 trillion miles. So it's very, very far away. The second one, the one found recently by the Canadians, 1.5 billion light years away. Now, could that be aliens that are, in those galaxies very far away, and they have some need to get in touch, right, with these very short radio bursts? Well, maybe, but two things. First, every time we find something in space we don't understand, we blame the aliens. The aliens are the universal bad guys for everything, whether it's quasars, pulsars, the hexagon on Saturn, the Tabby star, you name it. Something that we had never seen before. There are going to be people who say, you know what, Bob? It's aliens. Well, I don't think it's aliens, and the reason is we found more than 60.
So if aliens do exist, what are they most likely to be like? Would they be like us? Chances are that would be a minority of the cases. So what we are excited about when it comes to this type of observation is that it's something new. And so every time we see something that we've never seen before, that's an opportunity to learn something new about the universe.
This is one of the hottest topics in astronomy today. Astronomy is a lot about exploration. We are trying to find the aliens. I mean, we use our antennas every day. There are other people who are using antennas every day to try and eavesdrop on a signal that would tell you that there's somebody out there at least as clever as the residents of Passaic, New Jersey, or something like that, right? So we are trying to do that, and that experiment is getting faster all the time. There's very little money for it. There's no government money, but it's getting faster because of the improvements in technology right here in the Silicon Valley where I am. Okay, so I think that it's something you could talk to your buddies about and say, you know what? It's very likely that we will be the first generation to find out that we're not the only kids on the block, that there are other intelligent beings out there in space. Dr.
Oluseyi, what should I tell my buddies about?
Contemplating their nature, because we've never seen one up close, right, is a wonderful night of discussion in and of itself.
All right, Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi, Seth Shostak, thank you so much for joining us, making us smarter here on ABC News Live as we explore this astronomical mystery. I'm Will Reeve. That's going to do it for us.
A pair of Harvard scientists say a massive, fast-moving visitor to our solar system may have been a probe sent by an advanced alien civilization. Astronomers were excited to discover the interstellar object last year. It was named Oumuamua. That's Hawaiian for messenger or scout.
It looks very different from objects that we have found in the solar system.
Avi Loeb, chair of the Harvard University Astronomy Department, said Oumuamua did not behave like an ordinary asteroid or give off gas like a comet.
There seemed to be an extra force that is pushing it, and it's not clear what this push is from.
In an upcoming paper, he and a colleague offer what they call a more exotic scenario. Oumuamua may be a fully operational probe sent intentionally to Earth vicinity by an alien civilization.
Can you do anything about it, maybe going back in time and improving the most recent Star Wars films?
Oh, no, that's irreversible damage.
That's level 3, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
No, but you see, time travel actually is theoretically possible. Stephen Hawking once said, "Where are the time travelers from the future taking my picture?" Well, we think maybe they're invisible. By then, time travelers will have invisibility. In fact, we may have it in a few decades, in which case maybe they're all around us and we don't even know. Now, Einstein said that time is like a river, and we're swept up by the meandering of this old man river. It speeds up and it slows down, and we measure that every day with our GPS systems. Einstein was right. We measure them every day. However, the new wrinkle that's causing shock waves to reverberate through the community is the river of time can have whirlpools. The river of time may fork into two rivers, in which case time travel is now something we have to take seriously. Whirlpools and forking in the river of time. This means that we can build a time machine, perhaps, to wrap time into a pretzel, go backwards in time, and meet your teenage mother before you're born.
Are you talking about Terminator?
No, I'm talking about Back to the Future.
Oh, okay.
Now, if she falls in love with you, you're in deep doo-doo.
Yeah, I was wondering, so that is possible, huh?
It is theoretically possible. Now, I don't say that any inventor tomorrow is going to invent a machine in their basement. The energy necessary to bend time into a pretzel would require the energy of a star.
Well, isn't there a risk that, you know, the same risk that they talk about in Back to the Future and even in Terminator and all these movies that play with the time travel paradox, which is, isn't there a risk that going back permanently alters the timeline and, as you said, creates another fork?
Well, like I said, if you go backwards in time and meet your teenage mother before you're born and she falls in love with you, you're in deep doo-doo. Because how can you be born if your teenage mother just fell in love with you? Well, the resolution to all these paradoxes is that the river of time can fork into two rivers. You have jumped stream. You've gone from one timeline to another timeline, and that woman who just fell in love with you looks like your mother, talks like your mother, is genetically equivalent to your mother, but is not your mother. Your mother gave birth to you. Your mother fell in love with your father, let's hope. This woman in front of you is your mother in a parallel universe.
How do you, is there a way to, so what you're implying is that Marty got stuck in a parallel universe. So how do we know he ever came back to the real, you know, 1985?
Well, we don't know for sure. There's a TV program called Sliders where people slide between universes, and they always try to come back to the original timeline, right? Yeah. Well, if you watch the first show, a young boy reads a book and falls asleep, and then the program starts. That book, by the way, is my book, Hyperspace. My book, Hyperspace, spawned a TV series called Sliders.
I love that show. I remember it very well. Jerry O'Connell.
So anyway, the point is that if you jump stream from one timeline to another, you've saved Abraham Lincoln from being assassinated, but it's not your Abraham Lincoln. History was meant to be in your universe. You cannot change your own past. You've changed somebody else's past. So that's how we resolve all time travel paradoxes. There are no paradoxes if you believe in a quantum theory of time. But you know that if you have a radio in your living room and it's you have all frequencies in your living room, BBC, Radio Moscow, ABC, but your radio is tuned to one frequency. You're decoherent from all the other frequencies. You're only coherent with one frequency.
Right.
We now believe that the universe is vibrating and that there are vibrations of different universes right in this room. There are the universes of dinosaurs because the comet didn't hit 65 million years ago. They're the wave function of aliens from outer space looking at the rubble of an Earth that already was destroyed, all in your living room, except we have decohered from them. We're no longer in tune with them. We don't vibrate with them. Therefore, our universe is tuned to one frequency, our universe. But it means that probably there are other parallel universes in your living room, and believe it or not, this is called modern physics. Now, we don't like to tell chemistry students and first-year students the idea of parallel worlds because it would upset them. You know, they might go crying, you know, crying to their mother. But hey, get used to it. This is the modern interpretation of the quantum theory that many worlds represents reality.
There are an enormous number of stars. Only some of them will have planets suitable for life. On only some of those worlds will intelligence arise. And perhaps a few of those civilizations will avoid the trap jointly set by their technology and their passions. If there are many civilizations, one of them should be rather close by. If there are few civilizations, then even the nearest may be very far away. This is one of the great questions. How many advanced civilizations capable, at least of radio astronomy, are there in the Milky Way galaxy? Let's call the number of such civilizations by the capital letter N. It's a number. It depends on many things. It depends on the total number of stars in the Milky Way. Let's call that N sub star. It depends on the fraction of stars that have planets. Let's call that F sub P. It depends on the average number of planets in a given solar system that are ecologically suitable for life. Let's call that N sub E. It depends on the fraction of suitable planets in which life actually arises. Call that F sub L. It depends on the fraction of inhabited planets on which intelligence emerges. Let's call that F sub I. And on the fraction of those planets in which the intelligent beings evolve a technical, communicative civilization, call that F sub C. Finally, It depends on the fraction of a planet's lifetime that's graced by a technical civilization. Call that F sub L. If we multiply all these numbers together, we've estimated capital N, the number of civilizations. This equation, due mainly to Frank Drake of Cornell, is only a sentence. The verb is equals. So let's try to go through the program of this equation. By carefully counting the number of stars in small but representative regions of the sky, we find that the total number of stars in the Milky Way is about 400 billion. It's a lot of stars. What about planets? Well, in studies of double stars, in investigations of the motions of nearby stars, and in many theoretical studies, we get a strong hint that many, perhaps even most stars, are accompanied by planets. So let's take F sub p, the fraction of stars that have planets, as a quarter. Then the total number of planetary systems in the galaxy is 400 billion times a quarter, or 100 billion. We'll write down our running totals in red. Now, if each system were to have, say, 10 planets, as ours does, there would be 100 billion times 10, or 1 trillion worlds in the galaxy, a vast arena for the cosmic drama. In our own solar system, there are several bodies that might be suitable for life of some sort. There's the Earth, of course, but there are possibilities for Mars, for Titan, perhaps for Jupiter. If other systems are similar, there may be many suitable worlds per system, but to be conservative, let's choose N sub e equal 2. 2 worlds suitable for life per system. Then the number of planets in the galaxy that is suitable for life would be 100 billion times 2, or 200 billion. Now, what about life? Under very general cosmic conditions, the molecules of life are readily made. They spontaneously self-assemble. It's conceivable that there might be some impediment, like some difficulty in the origin of the genetic code, say, although I think that's very unlikely given billions of years for evolution. On the Earth, life arose very fast after the planet was formed. So let's choose F sub L, the fraction of suitable worlds in which life does arise, as a half. In that case, the total number of planets in the Milky Way in which life has arisen once is 100 billion times 2 times a half, or again, 100 billion. 100 billion inhabited worlds. Now, the estimates get tougher. Many individually unlikely events had to occur for our species and our technology to emerge. On the other hand, there might be many different roads to high technology. Some scientists think that the path from trilobites to radio telescopes, or the equivalent, goes like a shot in all planetary systems. Other scientists disagree. Let's take some middle ground and choose F sub I as a tenth and F sub C as also a tenth, meaning that only 1%, a tenth times a tenth, of inhabited planets eventually produce a technical civilization. If we were to multiply all these factors together, we would find 100 billion times a tenth, or 1 billion planets on which civilizations have arisen at least once. Now, what percentage of the lifetime of a planet is marked by a technical civilization? The Earth has harbored a civilization capable of radio astronomy only for a few decades, the last few decades, out of a lifetime of a few billion years. It's hardly out of the question that we might destroy ourselves tomorrow. If that's a typical case, then F sub big L would be a few decades divided by a few billion years, or 100 millionth, a very small number, and then big N would be 1 billion times 100 millionth, or N maybe just 10 civilizations, a tiny smattering, a pitiful few technological civilizations.
in the galaxy. But civilizations then might take billions of years of tortuous evolution to arise and then snuff themselves out in an instant of unforgivable neglect. If this is a typical case, there may be few others, maybe nobody else at all, for us to talk to. But consider the alternative, that occasionally civilizations learn to live with high technology and survive for geological or stellar evolutionary timescales. If only 1% of civilizations can survive technological adolescence, then F sub big L would be not 100 millionth, but only 100th. And then the number of civilizations would be 1 billion times 100th. The number of civilizations in the galaxy then would be measured in the millions. Millions of technical civilizations.
So, if civilizations do not always destroy themselves shortly after discovering radio astronomy, then the sky may be softly humming with messages from the stars, with signals from civilizations enormously older and wiser than we.
But in 2001, suddenly the media paid some interest, because then something appeared that was almost impossible to overlook. Right behind me is Britain's largest radio telescope, the Chilbolton Observatory. And here it was that the greatest sensation in the crop circle history was to appear in the fields right in front of the telescope.
On the morning of 14th of August 2001, a formation was discovered which was different from any other previously seen. From the ground it looked like a tangled mess, wisps of crops spread around in no system. However, in the evening, with growing shadows, a picture appeared, unmistakably that of a face. That picture represented a whole new technique, a screen technique, the same that's used for printing a picture on paper. 3 days later, the face was joined by something that looked like a data strip. Rows of counters made out of standing and flattened crop. But soon an astonishing similarity is discovered. In 1974, the astronomer Carl Sagan composed a message that NASA sent into space from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Binary figures which constituted a graphic code presenting key factors about humans and the planet we live on. 27 years later, an identical pattern appears in a crop field right in front of a similar radio telescope. However, on closer inspection, it seemed to show that the code contained some fundamental differences. Sagan's message explained our calculation system, the dominant chemical substances within the elements that create life on Earth, about our DNA code, humans' height and quantity, and that we live on the third planet in our solar system, and lastly, a sketch of our radio telescope. The message received described the same calculation system, but that silicon is most dominant in life forms in contrast to carbon. The drawing also clearly shows a humanoid figure with large head in relation to its body. It's also explained that they have an extra string in their DNA, are approximately 4 feet tall, inhabit the 3rd, 4th and 5th planets in their solar system, and have a population of around 21.3 billion. Underneath, the telescope has been replaced by something more complex. 1 year earlier, a strange crop circle had appeared in the same place. Is this the same illustration as in the sender's code? Is this the correspondence radio telescope? If this is not an extremely clever and well-calculated joke conducted by humans, is it a serious response from an alien civilization?
The Chilbolton crop formations really gave new life to the speculations of who is behind this. Is it aliens? Where do they come from? And what is their purpose of this type of communication?
The following year, very nearly on the same day, a new picture appears that gives new force to the alien theory, this time in Crabwood, near the town of Winchester in Hampshire. Once again we see a face, but this time there is an unmistakable resemblance to something extraterrestrial. The picture also contains a print, somewhat similar to that of a CD, with something that appears to be a coded message. This formation also has a new type of design, this time with horizontal line patterns of variable thickness, similar to that of a TV picture. The message on the disc is similar to a spiral band built up of many boxes. But data expert Paul Weige manages to decipher the message.
And I had to enlarge the disc quite substantially on the computer and run some image analysis over it to make it clear so that I could see what was a standing tuft and what was flattened. And while I was doing this, I noticed that every so often there was almost a mistake in the diagram. It was like there was a tuft, where the little square tuft, it had done sort of half size. I thought that's a bit odd, and it seemed fairly regular. I was going round, and I sort of counted up, and it was sort of literally every sort of 8 bytes or whatever. And I thought, oh, 8 bytes, and yeah, from computer side, is obviously some sort of binary code. So then I did the straightforward thing. I just converted it into ASCII, which is the standard sort of computer language that you encode the alphabet in. And of course I then started to get words forming out, and I thought, I'm getting somewhere here. So I then did the whole thing for the whole lot, and got this message.
The message is in English and reads as follows. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. Many have been surprised by this message. Are there aliens with such faces that we should be aware of? Or is this a picture of the sender? Does this indicate the start of actual close contact with neighbors in the universe?
My own, and this is only a hypothesis, belief about this, is that there's an effort of the extraterrestrials are gradually trying to communicate with us. A very slow process, giving us a lot of time to digest the fact that we may not be alone here.
To these very strange images that are behind your head right now. These are pictures of equations. I've been, for the last 15 years, trying to answer the kinds of questions that my colleagues here have been raising. And what I've come to understand is that there are these incredible pictures that contain all the information of a set of equations that are related to string theory. And it's even more bizarre than that, because when you then try to understand these pictures, you find out that buried in them are computer codes just like the type that you find in a browser when you go surf the web.
You're saying your attempt to understand the fundamental operations of nature leads you to a set of equations that are indistinguishable from the equations that drive search engines and browsers on our computers.
That is correct. So,
wait, I have to just be silent for a minute here. So you're saying as you dig deeper, you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code, you're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s. That's what we find very, very deeply inside the equations that occur in string theory and in general in systems that we could say are supersymmetric. Some of those codes are showing on the screen behind you right now. They don't look like codes, but these pictures, which we call adinkras, are graphical representations of sets of equations that are based on codes. That in the description of our universe, that is a supersymmetrical universe, which we were going to test in the LHC. If you believe that description, I can show you the presence of these codes. That's my statement.
Do you have any predictions in your ideas, or any ways to test any of your ideas any more than, say, the guy over on the screen?
The work that I'm doing is in fact so theoretical that we don't understand yet whether it is even possible to complete the program. We have found these strange graphs We know that they are equivalent to equations, and we have found in these equations computer codes. And so that's where we are right now. So I cannot give you a prediction. This work is less than 2 years old.
But it's not that you recognize that you will need a prediction in order to...
Someone recently asked me, said, well, you don't care about experiments, do you? And I said, no, that's exactly wrong, because you see, I have spent my career as a researcher worrying about supersymmetry. I would want to see an experiment before I shuffle off this mortal coil, so that I know that I did not waste my entire professional life.
This is towards Dr. Gates. Curious about your theory. You say there's computer code in these equations. Now, computer code is generally just instructions for a processor, and I'm curious as to what the instructions you're finding are, and if you're not sure what's to say that it's actually computer code. I mean, theoretically, the number pi has all the data that's ever existed.
Well, we say that they're computer codes.
You mean the digits in pi?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We say they're computer codes, first of all, because the structure of the equation is such that they dictate that there are certain things that are actually strings of ones and zeros. That's just digital data. But it's not just random ones and zeros. As I mentioned earlier, let me talk about something that you probably do every day, but I don't know if you're a computer scientist or not. Most of us sit at our...
Sounds that kind of fluency, I said.
Okay, well, most of us sit at our computer screens and we type on the keyboards, and we then send these, if we're using a browser, we're sending strings of ones and zeros elsewhere. But on the other hand, in the transmission process, there's always some fluctuation. So 0 that you type here because of static in line might be read as a 1 at the other end, and vice versa. And so in fact, when you sit and type on the keyboard, your computer's doing something behind your back. Namely, it throws in a bunch of extra ones and zeros, and these things are called error correcting codes, so that the computer at the other end can look at the whole collection of what you typed plus what was sent and figure out if there were bits that were being flipped back and forth. And that's how you get accurate transmission of digital data. Among the codes that are used for this purpose are a special class of codes that are called block linear self-dual error correcting codes. They were first, in fact, the Shannon extended checksum code is an example of one of these things. These are the codes that we find buried in the equations. Not just any code, but these self-dual error correcting block codes. It's quite remarkable for anyone that I've talked to. We have no idea what these things are doing there.
Any literature out?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any literature out that...
I can give you technical references that almost nobody in the world can understand.
But Jim, I thought you had a popular level article on this?
Thank you. Yes, actually, so this past June, the British journal Physics World asked me to write a popular level description of what we have found. So in the June edition of Physics World, and it's published in London, the cover story is called Symbols of Power. It's about these weird symbols that have been showing behind us. We call these things adinkras. And so for a popular level description, yes, we've written that. But other than this one popular level description, it's all technical gobbledygook. Wonderful. And that's a technical term, by the way.
Gobbledygook.
Thank you.
Physicists believe that when time began, at the moment of the Big Bang, matter and antimatter were created in equal amounts. And based on recent measurements made at CERN Laboratory in Switzerland, it seems there is perfect symmetry between the two, which they say implies that our universe should not exist. What? Okay, here to talk about this perhaps disconcerting discovery is CBS News science and futurist contributor and theoretical physicist Michio Kaku. All right, Professor Kaku, so can you explain, first of all, what antimatter is and how is it different from the matter that we interact with every day?
Well, there's a Nobel Prize out there if you can figure out how this thing works. Antimatter is the mirror image of ordinary matter. It's extremely rare. If I had some in my hand, it looked like ordinary matter. It has the same chemical properties, except if I touch it, it would explode and destroy all of New York City, parts of Connecticut and New Jersey. Every Star Trek fan knows that this is the greatest energy source in the universe, matter-antimatter collision.
Okay, all right, so that's it. Well, what is it about this symmetry between matter and antimatter that, leads CERN's physicists to this conclusion that we shouldn't exist, the universe shouldn't exist?
Well, at the inset of the Big Bang, there should have been equal quantities of matter and antimatter, which annihilated, driving the Big Bang. So, by rights, we shouldn't be here.
Right.
Because we have more matter than antimatter in our sector of the galaxy. We've looked for anti-galaxies. We've looked for anti-planets. We don't see any.
I don't even understand what that means, but okay, go ahead. Antimatter, anti-planets, because they would be made up of anti.
That's right. There should be anti-people, in fact.
See.
Anti-love, anti-CBS. But in fact, we see no evidence of that at all. So physicists say by rights we shouldn't exist. This means that at the instant of the Big Bang, there was a slight overabundance of matter over antimatter, and here we are as a consequence. Now, why? This is one of the greatest mysteries in all of physics. We are clueless to understand why. And like I said, if you want to win a Nobel Prize, figure this one out. Why was it there's a slight overabundance of matter over antimatter?
Yeah, all right. Well, tell us more about these experiments that CERN is doing to answer, or at least try to answer, these questions.
Well, they take an atom smasher and they take the energy out of it and put it into a bottle. It's called a magnetic bottle. You can actually trap anti-hydrogen, anti-electrons going around anti-protons. And when they measure the property of anti-hydrogen, it's exactly like ordinary hydrogen, except of course they would annihilate it if they touched each other. And that's so frustrating, you want to tear your hair out. They were looking for an asymmetry between matter and antimatter. They find none. And so that's the mystery. Why do we exist at all? By rights, we shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
By rights, we should have been disintegrated at the instant of the Big Bang.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there are all kinds of theories out there, but what are physicists kind of focusing in on? Is there one theory, two theories that are kind of the main focus?
Well, the leading theory is something called string theory, which is what I do for a living. I'm one of the founders of the subject, in fact, years ago. But even string theory has a hard time because you have to sort of like put it in by hand. And we want the theory to naturally come out with this overabundance of matter over antimatter, which explains why we don't see anti-galaxies out there and anti-planets. But we have a hard time doing it. So right now, nobody has a convincing answer to this question. Why should we be here?
Wow. Okay. Well, I won't ask you to give us a 30-second rundown on string theory because I think it'll probably take longer than that. Maybe we'll have you back sometime. But Dr. Michio Kaku, thank you so much for helping us understand this, or at least ponder the question, why are we here? Thanks.
Astronomers in Spain believe that hiding behind Pluto, obscured from our view, are two additional giant planets. Spanish scientists in Madrid discovered the potential for the two massive celestial bodies at the outer reaches of our solar system after studying strange patterns in the orbit of rocky objects around Pluto, including the newly discovered dwarf planet 2012 VP113. Scientists believe the first hidden world would be about 10 times the mass of Earth. They believe that this planet is moving in resonance with a bigger planet that is somewhere between Mars and Jupiter in size and would orbit 200 times the Earth's distance from the Sun. But can we ever conclusively confirm the existence of these two planets? Well, Scott Shepard at the Carnegie Institution for Science had this to say. As there are only a few of these extremely distant objects known, it's hard to say anything definitive about the number or location of any distant planets. However, in the near future, we should have more objects to work with to help us determine the structure of the outer solar system.
There is a lot of material out there. There's a lot of scientific material. There's a lot of junk out there about UFOs. Do look at the scientific material. There's a great deal to be learned. And let me give you one little thought. The most likely place that some of our visitors are originating from, one of two stars that are only 39 light years from here. That's just down the street. But these two sun-like stars are only an eighth of a light year apart. They're 30 times closer to each other than the sun is to the next star over. They're 1 billion years older than the sun. They have had plenty of time and plenty of incentive to develop means for travel between the stars. And even if they're only 500 years ahead of us, think what wondrous technology they will have.
Now, obviously, the three of us were not going to
blurt out, "Hey, Houston, we got something moving alongside of us, and we don't know what it is. You know, can you tell us what it is?" We weren't about to do that, because we know that those transmissions would be heard by all sorts of people, and who knows what somebody would have demanded that we turn back because of aliens or whatever the reason is. So we didn't do that, but we did decide we just cautiously asked Houston, how far away was the S4B?
60 seconds.
I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, "They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us."
I have no doubt that extraterrestrials could very well have populated or made structures on the far side of the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Entanglement is this notion that subatomic matter that becomes in a process, and even if the particles go apart from each other, even across the universe, they remain entangled in some very mysterious way, such that if you do something to one particle, the other one immediately and instantaneously responds regardless of where it is in the universe. That just shows that it goes right to the heart of the fact that the universe is mysteriously in some way interconnected, and we will call this an informational interconnection at that level. That still has a lot of mystery associated with it. If you consider the group emissions from every physical object, it carries unique information about that physical object, and it doesn't matter whether it's a light bulb in your house, your chair, your dog, an organ of your body. Everything is emitted and reabsorbing this energy. And in some areas, and sometimes we call that an aura. But one of the properties that Shemp discovered was that the photons are non-local and are interconnected, and they carry information. The ancients knew this, but they didn't know it quite the way we do it with quantum mechanics. And they called that particular property the Akashic record. Dr. Shemp discovered mathematics called the Nilpotent Dirac-Heisenberg Lie group algebra. Now that's a mouthful, don't worry about it. But that's the mathematics involved. And he discovered that we have this quantum property, and it is a non-local property, and it carries information about us, and it is the basis, and I happened to discover then, I wrote a paper called Nature's Mind, the Quantum Hologram, because that's exactly how our psychic stuff works. So we were in the plane of the ecliptic, which is a plane containing the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun, and oriented perpendicular to it and rotating in order to keep thermal balance on the spacecraft. And that allowed the view of the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, and a 360-degree panorama of the heavens to appear every 2 minutes in the spacecraft window. And that was this utterly magnificent view, and you must recognize that in space the stars are 10 times as bright and 10 times as numerous as you can ever see on Earth, and that's because of the lack of intervening atmosphere. And it's much closer to what we can now see with the Hubble telescope pictures that's brought back from Hubble. And anyhow, I recognize in looking at this that from my studies of astronomy at MIT and Harvard when I was getting my doctorate, that the molecules of my body and the molecules in the body of the spacecraft and my partners have been manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. And instead of intellectual knowledge, there was suddenly a visceral recognition, an insight, accompanied by ecstasy, and I'd never had this experience before. It was just overwhelmingly powerful. Here I came home with this experience happening for 3 days coming home, just blowing me away. And I got home, started looking in the literature to find out what all this meant, and could find nothing in science and nothing in this religious literature. So I turned to some scholars over to nearby university, Rice University in Houston, to be specific, and asked them to help me. And very shortly they came up with, out of the ancient Sanskrit in India, several thousand years old, the description called Salvakapa Samadhi, a mind state in which you see things in their separateness and in the way we see them, but sense them internally as a unity, as a oneness, and accompanied by ecstasy. And I said, well, when they presented this to me, I said, that's exactly what was happening, is that I could see all of this, but I was feeling absolutely blown away and excited and overwhelmed by the utter beauty and the unity of all of this. So I then, from that point, started delving into the cultures of various civilizations. And I talked to medicine men and kahuna in Hawaii and shamans from Tibetan Buddhism and the mystical and spiritual leaders of as many different cultures as I could get a hold of, and found that in every culture of the world, these types of experiences were somehow recorded in the lore and in the literature or in the verbal lore of that culture. And I realized that that was a common experience of we humans, and that it is rooted, probably rooted, in the very fundamental ground of our being. Some would call that God, but I would call that the zero-point energy field. Non-locality is the idea that this information between the two is transported, or is the interaction is instantaneously recognized, regardless of where the other part is in the universe. Well, this kind of challenges Einstein's concept that information doesn't move faster than the speed of light. But here we have validated that this is absolutely true, that it does. There's no doubt that it was covered up, that the Roswell incident was a valid visitation, that an accident did happen there, a crashed UFO.
If in a thunderstorm the Earth is struck by lightning, the force creates concentric waves which slowly expand to circle the world until they come back to where they started. This proves to us that the Earth's crust is a conductor of electrical energy. Now, if we were to produce large quantities of electrical energy, and if we directed it into the Earth's crust, then that energy would travel in concentric waves.
There were rumors you went to Colorado Springs in order to contact Mars. Is that true?
It is possible for us to send out waves which can travel around the world. There are waves as well which can travel into space.
How are you going to talk with them?
I never intended to. However, I recorded certain electrical impulses of unknown origin, and these were repeated at constantly timed intervals. It's possible they were a kind of signal from space.
And did you in turn send them a message?
Ask the Martians that question.
But you did send some sort of signal.
A signal which might not be received for 1,000,000 years.
Therefore, Mr. Tesla, you do believe communication with distant worlds may someday be possible.
Perhaps they've been sending us messages for ages, but we aren't aware of it.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
Do you think there is life on other planets?
No, I'm German.
It's aliens.